Uh, we're going to get started. I'll continue to admit people as they show up, but it is 12 o'clock, so welcome to Lunch with GreenTown. We are in the last week of our talks hosted by GreenTown Los Altos, your local environmental group, and I am going to miss them. As many of you know, we like planting trees, riding bikes, working with kids, and we will have another summer internship program coming soon. Please look at our website for more information and about all the things that we do and to volunteer to help. We always need more volunteers. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by admitting people. Anyway, these lunch talks are about 1 hour with time for questions. Please use the chat feature to ask your questions. The talks are being recorded and will be posted later. A big thank you to the Los Altos Parks and Rec Department for helping hosting this series. And another shout out to the Sereno Group. They provided the funds for our outreach with a grant from their 1% for Good Climate and Culture Fund. And now let's begin. Today's talk could not be more timely. Julie Noblitt is going to talk about the future of water. And as we enter another dry year, water is once again front and center. Take it away, Julie.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. Thank you and to GreenTown Los Altos for having me. It is timely. Last week was actually National Groundwater Week. And yesterday was UN World Water Day, March 22nd. So this is a good moment for this. Today, I'm really going to talk about two things that are related, circular economy and the future of water. And I want to start with a quick poll, and I hope I can do this correctly. The poll, in fact, I'm just going to stop sharing this because I can see the poll better. So what I want to know from you all is, how familiar are you with this term circular economy? Is it something you've just never heard of before today, or you've heard of it, but you're not sure what it means? Or you are really immersed. The word circular is in your job description or in your title. You work with it every single day. So I'm going to give people just a second. Everybody in? Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So it looks like most of you might have heard of it and just not sure what it means. So that's perfect. I think this talk is going to be perfect for you then.
We're the right audience.
You are the right audience. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share my screen again. Hold on just 1 second. The technology. Okay, circular economy and the future of water. So let me tell you a little bit about how I come to this topic. So my background is actually in academic publishing, journals publishing, scientific and academic journals. And long about 2010, I did kind of a career pivot. Something else was calling to me. I didn't know what it was. And I gave myself a gap year at the age of 50. And I, laughing is the right response. So I gave myself a gap year. Part of what I did was I went to Bhutan, which is a little country in the Himalayas, and it's famous for officially measuring its gross national happiness instead of its GDP, or gross domestic product. And I was really curious about this. I wanted to know what that was all about. And it turns out they are not measuring how happy people are. They're measuring how good they are at creating the conditions for happiness. So what are the conditions for happiness? Access to healthcare, access to education, and really importantly, environmental preservation. And I came back from that trip thinking, wow, what if we thought like that here in the US? What difference would that make? And my path then started to be clear, and I ended up enrolling in Presidio Graduate School for Sustainable Management. And that's here in San Francisco, it's a green MBA. So triple bottom line, we look at people, profit, planet, all at the same time. And I came out of that MBA in 2016 with a startup in compostable plastics. I got very interested in plastics and packaging and the effect on our water systems. And that's how I started getting interested in water. And today I work for CSIRO, which is Australia's national science agency. In the way that, in the US, we have lots of national labs, I think about 17 of them. In Australia, they have just one. And there are 5,500 scientists. They cover this huge range of issues, all kinds of things. I work in the US office, which before COVID times was located in San Mateo. But I focus on climate change, water, plastics, and circular economy. And my job is to be the eyes and ears of CSIRO here in Silicon Valley and look for strategic partnerships to bring their technology and their R&D over here. So that's what I do. For the next few minutes, I am going to talk about, as I promised, circular economy, how that applies to water, circular water solutions. And I'll finish up with a couple of things that you can do locally. Okay, I'm going to set the stage first, though, by reminding you a little bit about the global water situation. So we are basically a water planet. 71% of the planet is covered in water, and it's a lot of water, but relative to the size of the Earth, it's actually not a lot. So, and most of it, 97% of it is ocean, is seawater. Only 3% of all water is fresh, liquid fresh water. But most of that isn't really accessible to us for use because it's bound up in some way. It's either too deep in the ground to get to, or it's bound up in glaciers or something like that. It means, and so this graphic here, that biggest sort of blue marble there is a sort of proportionate, this is from the USGS, I think, proportionate amount of all water on Earth compared to the size of the Earth. That little marble to the right of it is all the liquid fresh water that there is. And then the thing that you really can barely see, the little pinprick below that smaller marble and above Florida, that's the fresh water there is. And it's unevenly distributed over the planet. And with climate change bringing a lot of uncertainty about the future, that distribution is about to change, or is in the process of changing also. So that very much increases the uncertainty. So yeah, this is obviously a crisis for all living things, with the most vulnerable communities most impacted and first impacted. But it is also every company's biggest business risk. Because you cannot make anything without water. You can't function without water. And I thought that today, since I'm guessing most, if you're subscribed to this wonderful series, you've probably heard Linda Gass's talk. You've probably heard a lot about what you can do at home with low flow shower heads and things like that. But I thought today we would look at sort of the bigger picture and industrial uses of water, because that's something that I've looked at in particular in the last year through my work at CSIRO. So I'm going to share with you what I learned about that. Okay, but I promised I would tell you what circular economy actually means. Circular economy is actually a term that was coined by Ellen MacArthur, Dame Ellen MacArthur of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And she basically said, look, it's a vision for a new way of doing business so that we shift away from using and wasting so much natural resource. And this, of course, is not a new idea, but the way she presented it and the time she presented it, it just took off. And now now you see if you're advising a kid or a grandkid or you yourself are looking for a job, all of a sudden every company has a position for someone to look at circular economy solutions. So let me just say let me back up a second and contrast it with what we have now, with typically, and especially since the Industrial Revolution, is a linear economy. So that's where we take resources like water or minerals or whatever from the earth, we make things out of it, and then we dispose of it, and we create a lot of waste. And I'm defining waste as a product at the end that can't be used as food for anything else. So, a tree, for example, is a perfect circular economy system. It grows in dirt. When it lives, it emits oxygen, takes in CO2. When it dies, it goes back to the soil, and then another tree can be planted in it. That's a perfect circular economy system. But most of our processes for creating stuff create waste. That is stuff that cannot go back, that is a waste product, not food for anything else. And that creates what we call externalities in economic terms. Externality is something that a bad effect that it results from an economic system. Plastic is the perfect example of a linear economy product. It's designed to be thrown away, but then never degrade. And so it piles up unsustainably in oceans and waterways and things like that. That's a linear economy product. So now companies are very interested in not doing that anymore, right? This is a disaster with companies' names printed on it, literally. They want to stop that. So they want to stop that in terms of packaging, in terms of plastic, in terms of water, in terms of carbon emissions, and so forth. So circular economy. Ellen MacArthur's definition is here: an economy that's restorative and generative by design. And it basically has three pillars. A circular economy system would design out waste and pollution. You wouldn't end up with a ketchup packet that there's nothing to do with but throw into a landfill. That wouldn't happen anymore. It keeps products and materials in use. So once you've created something, then it gets reused over and over. It doesn't just pile up unsustainably. And then ideally, it would regenerate a natural system, like our tree, right? That when the tree dies, it actually it's regenerative. This, by the way, is not a new idea. There are many schools of thought that you might be familiar with: cradle to cradle, biomimicry, blue economy, natural capitalism. These are all things that have been out there that you can read about, books you can buy that have been out for a long time. But as I say, Ellen MacArthur, I think, came around in the right place at the right time, and this now circular economy version of it has really taken hold, and people are naming companies using circular, you'll see. I'll say one more thing about it. So circular economy, because nothing can be a tree. If you want a toaster that it's never going to be as circular as a tree. There's always, there's no free lunch. It's going to cost you something. So circular economy is a term that's really a matter of degree. And I'll just show you, this is our linear economy again, where we're taking something, we're making it, we're using it, and we're throwing it away, and we've got a lot of garbage. A recycling economy is sort of the next step along the way. It's a little bit better. We're still taking things, we're making them, we're using them. Some of it gets thrown away, but some of it gets recycled, gets reused again, and that's better. But our goal here is this circular economy where we're taking things, we're making them, and then as much as possible, it's not turning into waste. It's not turning into landfill. We're repairing it, we're reusing it, we're recycling it, we're returning it to original materials. So that's what it is. And so my feeling is circular economy is a little bit of a buzzword, but I think that's okay. Being perfect is the enemy of the good. That is, it doesn't matter if we get it perfect, we just have to get it going. We have to reduce our waste. Okay. All right, so let's turn to water. And what I promised I would do is tell you about initiatives that I see writ large. So who's working on creating a circular system for water? And this one is really worth noting. It's the National Alliance for Water Innovation. And it's new. It started just this year. It completed its road mapping this year. It's funded actually by the Department of Energy. And I'll return to that in a minute. It's $100 million over 5 years. The headquarters are here local at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. The research director is at Stanford. And you'll see when you go, if you go to their website, their goal is to secure a circular water economy. And what they see is that very little bit of fresh water, increasingly uncertain future. And they're saying, how can we make it faster, easier, cheaper to use non-traditional water sources and do it cost competitively with existing water sources? And can we do it fast? So I've even heard them talk about it as the Manhattan Project for water. They're really trying to go fast. So I'm returning to this other, this question about why is the Department of Energy interested in water? And I can't see you guys, but would anyone like to hazard a guess as to why take yourself off mute and just suggest why the Department of Energy would be interested in water?
I know somebody out there knows the answer.
That's okay. I'll just, it's because water and energy are so incredibly linked. So it takes water to produce energy, and a lot of it, and vice versa. It takes energy to produce water, and how much we're going to just see in a second. So here's the USGS again, data. It's a little bit old, but it's for our purposes okay. The top uses of fresh water in the United States, look how much is proportionately used by power plants and irrigation. So what this tells us is that a lot of our use of water is embodied use of water. So when we save, it's food. Here's irrigation is really farming. So it's, and livestock. So food, energy, water. The three are really very much connected. So just launching in, I should have had a little transition slide there. Sorry about the abruptness of that. But what I want to tell you now is some of the kinds of technologies that are in use or being developed as we speak to kind of address this big problem of how do we secure a more resilient water future, and how do we do it fast? Because really, if it requires completely tearing out all our infrastructure and doing it again, that is not a fast process. So this is not a silver bullet solution, it's silver buckshot. It's going to be lots of things coming together. And that's what NAUI knows, and that's part of what we've been working on at CSIRO. And it sort of makes sense that Australia is working a lot on water, because famously it's arid. They've been having, there was big flood this week. They're looking at climate change, the wildfires, the floods. Water security is a big issue there. So here's an example. So there's a class of solutions that have to do with pre-treating water so that it's easier to filter and easier to get contaminated water to be reusable in some way. So this is one of the innovations that came out of CSIRO. It's called Virtual Curtain. And it's a very interesting technology. It was devised to treat industrial and mining wastewaters to a quality suitable for reuse or discharge into the natural environment. So basically, Virtual Curtain, you take the wastewater through they're called hydrotalcites, sort of naturally occurring chemicals. It precipitates the gunk, what they call the nasties, out of that water and takes it to a level that could then be treated. And so instead of having all that awful industrial wastewater sitting in an evaporation pond for a long time, you can precipitate out all the yucky stuff, which you see in the lower right there, and discard that, and then you can capture more of the water. So that's Virtual Curtain is but one of many pre-treatment options that are being worked on out there. The other emphasis I see is on data, predictive analytics. How do we know in an uncertain future where our water contaminants are going to come from? One of the things that climate change, or a warming climate, means that we have more algae blooms. And when we have algae blooms, those are toxic and they need to be dealt with. So CSIRO has this program called Aqua Watch. It's very cool. They combine in situ sensors in the water. So they've put sensors in inland waterways. And they combine the data they get from those sensors with data they're getting from satellites that are monitoring water conditions. And so they can marry those up, and occasionally they will also triangulate that with citizen science reports. So people who are going out and saying, yes, here's the color of the water, here's what's happening. They can predict algae blooms, and then that helps water managers understand better and with more advance notice what's coming. So monitoring water quality from space is something I'm seeing. Then there's purification. So if you know anything about, and Gary impressed me by knowing what reverse osmosis membranes are, when we talked about this yesterday, but wastewater plants make use of what are called reverse osmosis membranes to purify water. And it's a really terrific technology, but it has gone about as far as it can go. Improvements in reverse osmosis have probably slowed down to nothing. And so people are very interested in how could we do that better? CSIRO, among others, I'm using this as an example because I'm familiar with it, but there are many, many others, has a technology called Graph Air that has the promise of making dirty salt water drinkable. And this has not been scaled up. This is at the lab stage, but you can read about it in Fast Company. It's a type of graphene that's made from a thin layer of pure carbon. And basically the way it works, but you can't ask me any more than what I'm about to tell you because I do not claim to understand the science. But essentially, the film has microscopic nanochannels and a unique atomic structure that allows only the pure water to go through while rejecting all the other big particles and contaminants and salts and things like that. So that's a very interesting, if that works at scale, is very interesting. And my last example is modular systems. So this is another thing that the National Alliance for Water Innovation is very interested in, modular systems, because they do great things for water access equity. If you can make a local solution for not very much money for hard to reach places, that's a very good thing. So here's one example of that. This company is called, or this technology is called WeDo, and it's water from air. I put here what that means: wood to energy, deployable emergency water, WeDo. This one was the grand prize winner for the Water Abundance X Prize not very long ago. But what's very cool about this is that it's using a kind of renewable energy instead of petroleum-based energy to create this solution. And the waste out of the biomass generator that's used is biochar that can be used as a soil amendment. So this is a very nice circular solution where nothing is actually, or very little is actually wasted. And then their condenser here is actually extracting water from the air and making it in a drinkable form. So this is very cool. I put the URL here if you'd like to go take a look at it. So I said I would finish up here with some things that you can actually do or take a look at. One thing you can do to understand better what your embodied use of water is, that is, as opposed to direct use, is to take this, go to this water footprint calculator and fill it out and answer their questions. It's a little bit involved, so it points you to all the ways in which you're actually using water aside from the shower and watering your garden and washing your car. Really wonderful high school teacher, Woodside High School teacher, pointed me to this, Alton Lee, who teaches the Green Academy. This is fun. So start there. And just to underscore that other point about energy and water. Energy requires water, water requires energy. And this this is another way of saying what I said earlier, that really most of the water that we're responsible for is bound up in food and in energy. And then the least of it is direct household use, actually. That doesn't mean you should stop conserving direct household use. It just means that it's interesting to be aware of how your choices in food and energy also affect water. Here's just a couple more programs. If you do want to influence beyond your own household, the BayREN, which is a California program, is launching this spring something called Water Upgrade Save. And this is a program that would allow you to reduce your water footprint and then get refunds on your water bill. And they've finished a pilot for, I think, 3 municipalities. And if you want your town or your county or your water municipality to participate in it, check it out and uh, yeah, do what you can to get your municipality to participate. I keep pressing the wrong button. Okay, the other thing is Heirs to Our Oceans. This is a local organization that does global work for youth. So this is, if you know someone, if you are or know somebody between the ages of, I think it's 8 and 24, who wants to take action on preserving water, not only oceans, also waterways. This is a terrific organization to get involved with. They they teach kids how to do policy advocacy. In normal times, they troop up in person to Sacramento to lobby their representatives. But they also do other very cool things. If you happen to live in Palo Alto, or even if you don't, check out Save Palo Alto's groundwater. This is a group that's gathered a lot of really good information about the effect of particularly digging basements and pumping out from the water table. And Gary told me yesterday that GreenTown Los Altos does an incredibly fun Lawn Begone bike tour that may be coming back, I understand, now that we're getting closer to getting to be normal.
I usually do that in April, which is coming right up. I don't know if we're quite ready for that. So
not ready yet. Okay.
Probably not this year, unfortunately.
Keep a watch out for it.
But I do lead a bike ride called the Summer Solstice Night Bike Ride. And that's a fun experience. And that's in June. Maybe by June we can do something.
Nice. Okay, one last thing. On Netflix, this is a pretty new film, a documentary film called Brave Blue World. If you're interested in learning more about circular water solutions, both here and around the world, this is a good film to watch, and it's not too long. And I'm a doc film nerd, so I really liked this one. So that's all I have. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. And yeah, I will take any questions you might have.
Let's see, why don't you stop the screen share and then we can see everybody, go to gallery view and see who else is here. That's always fun. That's the button in the upper right. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so we're ready to take some questions. I guess the first thing that crossed my mind is a lot of what you talked about are the big picture sorts of approaches that are taking place by others, because we can't on our own do that much. I mean, we can certainly cut down on our individual water use, like you said, the lawn, and we can make some food choices that would help. But it's going to take some bigger efforts.
Okay.
Got somebody on. Anyway, hold off on speaking up just yet. But anyway, what's the motivation for these big companies? I know the Department of Energy is motivated because there's a huge connection between the amount of energy used to purify water and push water around and pump it. But is there a deep-seated motivation in your experience with the other companies, the plastic generator, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question. And as I mentioned before, really, this is everyone's biggest business risk. You know, you can't make anything without water. That's one thing. I mean, that it's a resource that is absolutely necessary to do business. And if you're at risk of, say, being regulated out of using certain kinds of water, which may, you know, could happen in the future, or if you just simply, let's just say we've got sea level rise risk So wastewater treatment plants are located on coasts. Anything that's located on a coast is at risk of flooding. New areas at risk of drought. So there's an economic incentive to pay attention to this. That's one. Another is a sort of PR. So unless companies are perceived as doing something serious about their carbon emissions and their water consumption, they may lose customers, right?
Okay.
The young people are paying attention, especially some of the old ones too.
Some of us, some of the old folks too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. So it's not just greenwashing, which you're sometimes.
There's some greenwashing, but then there's some real stuff happening. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the citizen science, and that's fascinating because it does give us individuals an opportunity to help out. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that. And before you do, I want to tell everybody the current exhibition at the History Museum, Beauty and the Beast. The beauty is the wildflowers of California, and they're beautifully photographed, by the way. You really must come by, take a look. The beast is climate change, but there are opportunities there in some of the panels that they talk about the citizen science. And there's a speaker who is going to talk about that on April 22nd. It's one of the History Museum programs. So mark that on your calendar, April 22nd. You can learn more about becoming a citizen scientist. So Julie, what do you know about that?
That's very cool. So the citizen science project that I mentioned was the one that's happening in Australia. So CSIRO is very keen to integrate education systems, citizen science, uh, indigenous cultures that know a lot about their natural systems, but we're not getting information from them necessarily.
Okay.
Without, you know, specific programs and funding and all of that. So that's what I was referring to there. I hadn't heard of the citizen science project that you mentioned, Gary. That sounds fantastic.
Well, one of the groups is iNaturalist, and I actually use their app. It's called Seek when I go out and plant trees and want to identify things in the neighborhood. So
yeah,
you might try that. But as anybody, you can sign up with iNaturalist and become and take pictures of things just as you're walking around the neighborhood or out on hikes, and that is a useful thing to do. I know the biologists. You've heard of the bird counts that take place every, I think it's January 1st, isn't it? That they do that. Anyway, there are widely popular bird counts that take place. Well, there's also a wildflower count that's taking place. Mid-Penn biologists are doing that. And I'm sure that's another opportunity for a citizen scientist to go out and take pictures. As long as you don't walk on the flowers, take some pictures of them.
that's fantastic. Oh, and somebody says Nature Notebook is another one I'm seeing in the chat.
Oh, okay. Nature Notebook. Thank you, Glenda.
Does Glenda want to say what Nature Notebook is?
Put you on the spot, Glenda.
No, it was mentioned by the wildflower, the Beauty and the Beast. It was another source of being a citizen scientist.
Okay.
Fabulous.
Good.
Okay, I'll look at that. And I'm noticing David too just mentioned half the cost of water in LA is the electricity cost to pump it from the source in Sierra Nevada. Exactly right. Transporting water is incredibly expensive, which goes back to the importance of modular systems and local choices for water. I actually heard a Stanford researcher on a webinar talk about, is it possible that we're moving toward community choice water the way we have community choice energy? Which was something I hadn't heard before, but is interesting to think about. Somebody's also asking, are you aware of anyone doing circular packaging pilots? This seems like a big challenge. Oh my gosh, packaging. I could talk for 2 hours about packaging. Um, I won't, but yes, packaging, food packaging is an area um, that is really ripe for change. And um, what I know of a couple of business models for designing out waste. Remember, I said for circular economy, one of the pillars is to design out waste. So how might we deliver products without using little single-use bits of plastic? And so there's a couple of models I know of. One is called Loop, which is now working with big packaged goods providers to deliver you products in reusable containers. So it's a little bit the milkman idea, where you get delivered your product in a reusable container. When you're done with it, you return the container, they clean it up and give you more stuff. So that, ice cream and shampoo and things like that, that's a very interesting model. The other thing that I'm seeing pop up more and more of are these refill stores. And there's several of them in the Bay Area. If anyone's interested, I can send you a list later on. But these are also terrific. These are plastic-free stores. In the same way that you might, at a food co-op, you might bring your own container and fill up your peanut butter. Why not do that with shampoo? Why not do it with laundry soap? And so there are now refill stores where you can do that. There's one in San Jose, there's one in the East Bay, and they're popping up all over the place. The other thing that somebody mentioned about citizen science, Heirs to Our Oceans and the Break Free from Plastic initiative has a cool thing that you do on Twitter or Instagram called the trash tag campaign. So basically you go out, you find a piece of plastic litter on the ground, you take a picture, you take a selfie like this, and then you tag the company and you say, is this yours? I just want you to know that this is on the street in front of my house. And so this is part of a campaign, basically. It's not exactly citizen science, but it's a part of a campaign to put pressure on companies. And we typically, companies really do care about this because I had a startup in this area. I did some interviews with big companies about their attitudes about this. And, basically they'll say, hey, I don't really hear from customers that it's a problem. And so it does make a difference to let companies know, hey, I love your product. I want to buy it from here to the end of time. If you ever go out of business, I'm going to be crushed. But I really need you to change the packaging. That kind of messaging helps. And it's the same thing with water and water waste. The person I talked to for Palo Alto, Save Palo Alto's groundwater, speaking up, taking your 2 minutes at the city council meeting, talking to visit your wastewater treatment plant, talk to them, find out what they're concerned about, have conversations with your neighbors, have conversations at schools. These things all make a difference.
Yeah, that's important. I'm thinking about the plastic waste. This is something that is so complicated. It's hard for us to have much impact on that because there's a zillion different ways that plastic is being used and so many types of plastic. It'd be nice if it was simplified, and not sure how,
yeah,
other than heavy-handed regulation, I'm not sure how you can make that happen. But
it's a complicated issue, but I think it really boils down to volume and single use. So if you can eliminate single use, you're going a long way toward helping.
I mean, that's where you want to design it in there so that the plastic is reusable in the first place. If you're going to use plastic, if you still need to use it, but at least make that or part of the package is that it can be recycled. I mean, we had the talk by Louis Pellegrini from Mission Trail, and and he collects all this stuff, and they do their best to sort it out. But you get down to a certain residue. It's about a 20% residue that is just so mixed up that it's hopeless.
You
And
can't.
so,
That's right.
and
And
ironically, his contract is based on pounds, diverting pounds, and plastic doesn't weigh very much. So there's even less motivation to try to deal with it.
That's
So
exactly
trying to
right.
fix it at the end is too late. You've got to fix it at the start.
Totally right. I have a whole talk on that. You could have me back.
We'll have you back for another talk.
Somebody says they've converted their pool into a cistern.
How do you swim?
And actually, the problem is that pools are a real money sink, and we weren't using it.
Oh, because you didn't want to heat it.
Well, heating, yeah, I mean, heating just adds more cost. You know, just maintenance of a pool, and water evaporation and the electricity cost of filtering and all of that is thousands and thousands of dollars a year. And our irrigation water is now supplied from rainwater.
Wow.
That you collect.
Yes, that we collect from our roof.
And it says you say your water usage has gone down 80%.
Right.
That's amazing. And let's see, Shelley has mentioned
That's a good one. Pure Cycle Tech. Tell me about that.
I don't know Pure Cycle Tech. Maybe Shelley can tell us about it. In the meantime, she may not want to, but we'll go look at it.
Okay.
But Bill Shreve is talking about the water cost of cleaning reusable products for reuse. This is a very interesting question.
Well, and Julie, it's not just the water cost, but there's a lot of handling.
The handling, the carbon that's embodied in, you know, coming back and getting it and, you know, delivering it and all of that. So there's something called life cycle analysis, or LCA, that every company like this does to look at, okay, yes, there's a cost, as I mentioned, there's no free lunch, right? So there's a cost to washing it, there's a cost to processing it, there's a cost to transporting it. And so Loop, for example, when you ask them, how does that pencil out? Like, okay, we're saving the plastic, but is the benefit of saving the plastic outweighed by, you know, the cost of processing it? And they did do that analysis, and they do know how many times something would have to be reused in order to make it worth it. I forget what it is now, and I'm sure it varies for every type of container, but it's something like, you know, for a shampoo bottle, for it to pencil out, you'd have to use it X number of times for it to make sense. And yeah, that's a really good question. The thing about plastic, it being a petroleum product, the cost of producing virgin plastic is quite high. It's part of what makes plastic such a gnarly thing, because it's very cheap to produce, and has a very expensive externality. You know, that it's carbon emissions, it's toxicity, it's pollution, all of that. So yeah, it's a very interesting question, an important one.
So what's the takeaway for this group? What can we do?
Well, for water, I'd say there's some great suggestions for, you know, your personal footprint. One thing that I did that you can do in Palo Alto, and I think you can do in most towns, is have somebody come and do a water assessment. And in a few minutes, an expert can tell you where you could save water, look for leaks, look for shower heads, look for low flow toilets. I've got a heat pump dryer that actually collects the water from the clothes in a little cistern, which you can then pull out and then use to water your plants.
Oh my goodness.
It's amazing. Europe is really far ahead of us. This is in terms of thinking about efficiency, because water and energy and all of that is very expensive there. So, you know, in addition to your personal footprint, as I mentioned, go watch the documentary, talk with your friends and neighbors and organizations about the issue of water, get yourself educated about what's happening locally. And yeah, there's plenty of opportunity to take action. And I'm seeing one last question here. Is there any Bay Area effort at reducing wastewater?
Reusing.
Reusing wastewater. And do you have a California-centric graph for freshwater use? I don't have a California-centric graph handy to show you right now, but they do exist. And reusing wastewater, if you go to the Baylands and you see purple pipes out there, that is reused, that means recycled water is flowing through those pipes.
Julie, I was more interested in knowing if there's any complete reuse of the water. In other words, converting it back into potable water and feeding it back into the system.
Yeah, so to my knowledge, we are not treating wastewater to the degree that we would use it for drinking water. But that is kind of the holy grail for water conservationists. There are some barriers to that. There's what they call the ick factor, where, you know, people tend to be resistant to the idea of no matter how clean the water is, you know, a recycled source, it feels funny to people. But I think that's where we may be headed eventually, if we can.
Well, there's a pilot going on in San Jose to create that kind of water, completely to go to potable water. I don't think it's being used that way just yet, but they are doing that test. It uses a lot of reverse osmosis to clean it up too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, last questions? If not, we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Julie. That was great. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me.
So Thursday, coming up, 2 days from now, will be our final talk. And we will have Master Gardeners Lisa and Kathleen Putnam getting in the last word with some practical gardening advice on backyard cover cropping. And so we've had some other talks here by Hidden Villa. So production of our food locally is an important goal for us. And so this is another way to learn about doing that in your own backyard. So I hope to see you on Thursday. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.